Social media remains crucial for communication and marketing, but major policy shifts, especially after Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, are reshaping user behaviour. For more, we're joined by Dr. Karen Sutherland from the University of the Sunshine Coast. Good to see you. How have Musk's new policy changes impacted trust and content moderation on X?
Look, it's happening on X and it's happening across the board in terms of social media platforms. It's this, I guess, the stacking of fact checkers across Meta and X. So this reliance on the community to fact check, which is a bit of a worry. It's other things too. Social media platforms are now quite openly training their AI tools on users' posts as well, publicly available posts. So this has been going on for a while. People are just getting sick of it. This, and particularly with AI as well, and not capturing those posts that aren't true and the misinformation. There's so much going on that people overall are losing trust in the mainstream platforms and then going elsewhere.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. It's funny, who will police the police? And in this case, who will AI the AI? But what role do platforms like Threads, Mastodon and Bluesky play in this shifting landscape? I know Bluesky is perhaps a little bit more of a left-leaning version of X.
That is true. It seems to be because users from X have flooded over to Bluesky. And yeah, it just, I don't know, I think it almost harkens back to what Twitter used to be, because if you remember, the guy who created Twitter is the person who started Bluesky. So I think people are just reminiscing of what Twitter used to be like before Musk took over. I think they offer just something new and different, and particularly with Mastodon and sites like Medium, they offer the ability for really niche audiences to get together as well, and so they've become a much more preferable option compared to the mainstream platforms, because people are just worried in terms of what is true and false on those platforms, and those sort of security measures around fact checking have just gone out the window. So
yeah, it's interesting how we go from one platform, the algorithm changes, turns it into an echo chamber, and then something changes and everybody migrates to another platform, turns it into an echo chamber.
In the past week, what came out was that there are new sort of policies being presented in terms of AI. And one of those things is that AI platforms like OpenAI want to have open access, or complete clear access, to train their models on copyrighted material that's publicly available. And of course, creators are in an uproar about this, and particularly brands as well, because they've taken so long to create this content, and now an AI is going to be just using that without paying them for that information to train their models on. And it's interesting because OpenAI has come back with this rebuttal saying, in terms of fair use, we're not using it word for word, we're using it to create something new, and that is actually covered by fair use. So this will be interesting to see how they go to court to thrash that out, and if that actually comes out. And it's related to social media as well, because that's where a lot of this content is being pushed out to.
Yeah, 100%. So do you see a long-term future for X, or will decentralized platforms perhaps gain dominance as more of the platforms seek to emulate, in a way, what X has done?
I think X will have a place because there are people who love it, not as many as they used to, but I think there is definitely an audience there. And I think with the major platforms, particularly meta platforms, they have all of our information. They have all our photos, they have our connections. How would people even remember anyone's birthday anymore if it wasn't for Facebook's bringing up those memories and birthdays? So people rely on it much more than you realise. And so I think there's still a place for these platforms, but I think people will be moving, and people use a range of platforms anyway. So I think they will like that variety of the newer ones where people are going to.
That is so funny that you reminded me of the old Facebook birthday conundrum. Some birthdays I've completely forgotten the past because it wasn't on Facebook, or they're not on Facebook, etc. But let's move ahead. And as AI chatbots like ChatGPT become more commonplace, questions are now arising about their emotional impact on users. This is an interesting one. I have spoken to my ChatGPT using the voice commands and given it a voice, and it's spooky at times.
It can be, yeah. And so this was a study that was a partnership between ChatGPT and MIT in the States, and they analysed 40 million conversations across 1,000 users just to see what was happening there in terms of emotional conversations. And so what they found is that people aren't really using it. There are a few people who use it to have emotional conversations with the AI, and particularly voice users, but not many. But the group that were doing it heavily consider AI or ChatGPT to be their friend, which is quite interesting. And they found that the people who were doing it the most had the most negative impact on their well-being by doing that and relying on that. And it was a reminder from this study that AI is not a therapist, even though there are lots of tools out there and people trying to start up AI in a way that will help with therapy, of course, but essentially just your general run-of-the-mill ChatGPT is more like a mirror than a therapist. And so it's there to really reinforce what you're thinking. It's a people pleaser. I like to call it a people pleaser unless you tell it to be analytical.
Correct.
And so, again, it could be reinforcing these sorts of views that may not be so helpful to people.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point you make. And unless you do tell it that you wish to be challenged, you wish to be told to research more, you will get the people please model. But how are AI chatbots influencing social and emotional well-being moving forward? You did touch on a few things there, maybe the dangerous side of it being used for therapeutic outlets. But are there other things that we need to highlight?
What they were saying is that it's okay to use it as a sounding board, but it's like it's nice for a holiday, but don't live there in a sense. So it was really the people who were becoming emotionally dependent that were having issues. So it can be very worrying. There's upsides with it, but there needs to be lots of guardrails, and we have to really look at the way that we're using it.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, if you've got students or children out there making use of this software, it's important to keep an eye on it as well and keep an eye on their movements. But as always, it's an ongoing conversation. Dr. Karen Sutherland, thank you for joining me on the program.